Okay, so this video is actually broken up into two main topics. One, we're going to talk about the various drop downs, how to apply different formulas to satisfy different business logic. So if you look at my screen here, I have a status drop down, and this is pretty straightforward. No functionality are needed there. Here's a dealership. This is a lookup column that's looking up to a dealership list. They have a list of dealers. And based on the selected dealer, we need to filter the primary resident. So the primary representative. So you can see as you change the dealership here, we're going to go through all the formulas on how to make that happen. And the second part, now this is going to be interesting. We talk about the SharePoint integration. Now understand that SharePoint integration only applies when you're building a custom form using Power App, not necessarily the Canvas app and not a model-driven app that's tied to like a Dataverse. But this is going to be a SharePoint form built in Power Apps. And with that custom form in the SharePoint integration, there's a lot of magic that happens behind the scenes. And we need to tap into that magic because we have multiple screens and we're dealing with multiple forms. So just think about this, and we're going to unpack this in this video. And this is why this is pretty interesting. In this video, we're going to take multiple forms that really just represent a single line item in a SharePoint list, really kind of chunked up into multiple forms. So the biggest question is, how do you save something like that and not experience a race condition, meaning that the last thing saved overwrites the other ones, or so on and so forth? So we're going to go through that. We're going to set up our navigation on how we bounce between the different screens, how we collect information for each pieces of that list item. A lot to unpack here. Let's get started. Okay, so now we're part of the series where we need to build out our engagement. This is actually going to be a pretty interesting screen because even though it seems like it's pretty straightforward with our drop downs, these drop downs, each one of these actually have different characteristics. So our status is just going to be a simple choice drop down. Actually, I don't think there's any work that needs to be done there. Our dealership, on the other hand, is going to be a lookup to our dealership list. And then our primary rep is going to be a person column, but it's going to be filtered on the selected dealership. So we don't want them to select any, because it is a person column, it reacts like a people picker, allowing the user to select anyone in your Azure AD or anyone that's registered in your organization, whereas what we require is to filter this by the primary rep. So let's flash over and look at our list again. So again, this is our client list, which is going to capture everything. We have our dealership column. We also have our primary rep column. Now, dealership is a lookup. Primary rep is just a standard person type column. It's not going to be a lookup or anything like that, even though the information that gets stored here is going to be based off of the filter result from the sales rep. So in our client list, when they're on that engagement and they're trying to determine which dealership the client is associated with, they're going to select, for example, Cincinnati Blue Ash. And what we're going to do here is do this same filter where we're only expecting these 4 reps to be available, and we want to force that input, that people picker drop down, to only be these reps. And then when they switch the dealership to another dealership, let's just say Cleveland, then Keelan should be the only rep that they select. And then obviously this will be dynamic, because if they add here, our formula will kick in and reflect those options accordingly. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into our Power App Studio. So I'm gonna just select James Biggs as an example, use this, and then hydrate Power App Studio. Okay, so once we're here, let's just take a look at, so in the previous video, what we've done, we had these 4 screens here, and we just duplicated this main screen to create our other one. So we have a lot of residue that reflect the old name from our main screen component structure. And we want to make sure that this is relevant based on the screen that we have. So one of the big things that I do, especially when it comes to forms and screens, is that I rename those right away, so that way we're very clear on where we are, especially when we start writing out our formulas and navigation strategy. Okay, so I'm not going to rename the one, we'll get to vehicles and history once we get to those different areas. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and tackle this. Now, here's another thing to realize. This solution is going to have multiple forms. And here's the thing. The thing is, our users are going to go through all of these screens before they click save. So what we're doing is we're carving out, if we go back to our client list, we're carving out this one record that represents the client into multiple form instances. So one form instance may have this set of columns. The other form instance may have this set of columns, so on and so forth, right? So that's what we're going to do. So because we're using that, and we're always going to use the form component for all those scenarios, all we have to really do is to trim this form instance that represent the engagement to only include the columns or the fields that are needed for the engagement information. So let me go ahead and remove all of these remaining ones. Okay, so now that I'm empty, I want to add in status, dealership, and primary rep. And again, as we mentioned before, as long as you're adding these in the order you want them to appear, you don't have to move anything around. So it's dealership and then primary rep, and then click add. Status, dealership, primary rep. Now, if you remember in the wireframe, status had its own line, and we know how to do that. So we just want to double this. So 614 for the width, for the data card width. But we don't want our status dropdown to stretch all the way across. We still like to maintain its native width. So I'm going to just use this dealership dropdown as a beacon and get the value of 247. That's where we want this to be set to. Now I'm going to erase this formula that allows it to dynamically move based on the data card, and then just explicitly put a static 247 there. And now we should be situationed well. Now for our dealership and our primary rep, we want those to share the same row. So I'm going to just select primary rep, touch it, and that will snap it to the grid. And I don't need all this real estate for my form component, so I'm going to go ahead and shrink this, because eventually we're going to grow into having our previous and next buttons here to kind of help us navigate between the screens, as well as this navigation structure that we have here. Okay, so as I mentioned, status is easy because that's a choice column. Dealership is actually easy as well, but understand it's a lookup versus a choice. But primary representative is something where we have to do some work. Now, what I want to do is just filter the primary representative dropdown to only those from the sales rep data source based on the selected dealership. So I'm going to show you the way that your knee-jerk reaction is going to say, okay, do it this way, because actually, until you run into this issue that we're gonna face, that's how you would do it. In other scenarios, that's exactly how you would do it. But I'm gonna show you the way that you will want to do it, and it doesn't work. I'm gonna show you the right way to do it to where it does work. So the first thing we want to do is bring in our data source. So let me go ahead and filter this by SharePoint. Okay, so now I'm just going ahead and select my client site, and then from here, go ahead and select the sales rep data source. And let's just go ahead and put our filter in. So I have this primary rep drop down selected. I have to unlock it. It won't let me change anything unless it's unlocked. Throw my filter in there. It's trying to help out too much here. So throw my filter in there. I want to filter on the sales rep. And then again, I want to filter where the dealership. Now, dealership is, the context here is everything, right? So where the dealership ID here that's on the sales rep is the same dealership ID that's in this dropdown. Now, you know me, anytime that we use anything in the dropdown, we're going to rename it. And I'm going to rename this, let's just call this DD dealership. And that's going to represent the dealership dropdown for the selection. So now if I go back to my formula, this is going to be DD dealership dot selected, and then the ID from this one. Now, understand that I receive this ID and value pair because I'm using the lookup column type. If you were using like a standard choice, you would just have value. If it was a filter against a record or a table, then you would get the entire record and you have all those properties available to you. So if that looked weird to where say, okay, I get selected dot, wait, I get value and ID, like what's up with that? That's the reason, because it's a lookup, and that's how internally how lookup is stored. Okay, in theory, we're actually done, right? If I get a sample here of the records returned, I get the entire record from that sales rep list. And really the only thing I'm focused on is this sales rep column. This is going to have the person type value that I'm looking for. So if I just do dot sales rep, and that's going to bring it in. So now if I hold on my Alt key, change my dealership, sorry guys, I forget to zoom in so that way things are clear, especially when you're watching this through a stream. I can tell something's here, right? Because notice how I have all these entries, but if I select something else, I either have no entry or only have one, right? So I can tell something is happening. I just can't see it. And especially when dealing with a collection of people or data that have person type value, we know that in that drop down, especially in these combo boxes, they have templates to where you can define that says, hey, you're dealing with a rich object type or a rich value type. Which one of these properties do you want me to show in these different slots, right? And right now, this is all blocked for me. And that's why this way doesn't work. And again, if it wasn't, and I don't, actually, honestly, under the hood, I'm not sure what it's fighting with to where this is not valid, but it's fighting with something and this doesn't work. So the workaround is this. We know this is absolutely the data that we need, right? So I'm gonna just go ahead and copy this because this is what we need. But you almost have to do like a intermediary step. So you want to set a collection with that information. We want the collection to update based on the changes to this dealership. And we really just want to select this to that collection that we come up with. So let's just go ahead and erase this and let's just come up with an arbitrary name. Let's just call this reps. COL is just my prefix I use for collection, and set that drop down to collection of reps. That doesn't make sense to you because I haven't defined this, and I'm gonna define it in this drop down. And you notice that I'm gonna use the change event on this drop down. That's exactly what's happening, right? I always want this to update, and right now I only want this to update when this changes. So in the change event, I want to put a couple of things here. So I want to clear my collection of reps, and then I want to hydrate, because every time there's a change, whatever was in there, I want to clear that out, and then I want to hydrate it with this. Now, I really just can't. I wish there was a way to, maybe there is a way. What can I do this? I'm going off script, by the way. Can I just say collect? If this works, then you don't need this extra line of code that I'm about to introduce. All right. No, still blocked. It still doesn't like it, right? So really, in short, that was the exact same thing I had before. I just have a collection in between it. Okay, let's do it the right way. Let's do it the way that I know that works, that because I tested this out. I even shot a video on this, actually. So if I clear the reps, what I want to do, I do want to collect these, but I have to do them one at a time. And I don't know why I have to do them one at a time. So if I do a for, this is like a for each loop. So once I do this filter, right, let's copy that, paste that in. Once I do this filter, for each record that's returned in that table provided by the filter, I want to collect them into that collection variable. So I want to do a collect, right? So I want to collect them in that collection variable, and the secret sauce is to this record, because that's a reference to each record, and then the dot sales rep property from that record, and then set it equal to that. And I don't need this at all. Okay, so it still is. All right. So I think looks like I may be missing a parenthesis. Yep. So that's going to finish off my for all. Okay. So once I have that, and I already have that selected, so now I should be able to change this dealership. And wow, look at that. It was already wired up and everything. So I can change this dealership. And no, it looked like I still need some more work with the mapping. So let's see what's going on here in our mapping. Because what it's doing is doing this best guess for a map. Okay, so it looked like it was doing its best guess for our mapping. So now we need to get a little bit punctual here. So let's go from primary text. We want that to be the display name. If they do a search, we want them to search on display name. Secondary text is always good to show the email address, just in case are several Peter Pauls, right? So the email address would kind of hopefully help distinguish them, as well as the profile pic. So now that we have our exact match that we are looking for, this is working as expected. Okay, now once we have this all set up, and you can play around with this, if they have one selected and they change it, it won't reset this. So it's probably a good idea to put a reset control in there as well. So let me just name this real quick. And then in here on our change where we have our formula, let's just go ahead and reset the drop down sales rep control. And now the user experience should be where we need it to be. So if I have Ethan selected, change it to a different dealership, it clears it out, and now I just have these options to work with. Okay. All right. So now what I want to do, I just want to show you this. This is a little bit premature, but just in case you have a multi-screen, multi-form strategy, there's a certain way that you have to save these. Again, we have multiple form components representing a single list item in the SharePoint list. So how do you save that? And here's the formula. So what I'm going to do, because what we want to do, we want to gather some information, then under here, just click save. So let me add a button. Let's just call this save. And what I'm going to do, a border radius to kind of get rid of these sharp edges around the button so it doesn't look like a true square or rectangle. I usually go a border radius in between 3 and 5. They usually just soften the edges. You don't want the peel effect, but something just soft and subtle, right? And then I'm gonna do the branded color, and maybe just go a 14, a little bit larger to kind of make it pop. And this is gonna be my button. So I probably want a previous one. Remember, I'm on step 2 here, so I probably want to do previous. And then this, what I do the inverse. I give the font color, the brand color, the fill color, a white, and then the border color, the branded color. And that's how I do my light branding. And it looks elegant. It's branded, and it's simple. It's really, really simple. We don't go crazy on these brands because the maintenance story on those are horrible. Okay, so here we're going to have, to save this, here's the trick. So on select, so when you select that save button, what we're going to do is, it's actually a patch statement. So I'm going to patch this into the clients list, and the record, so for right now, we're going to use defaults. And we know that defaults gives me a blank record or empty record, but we're going to have to get smart. So for right now, we're going to do defaults and say, hey, we're just adding things, and then we're going to come back and we're going to make this smart to where it handles the update scenario. So we're just going to do defaults and then comma. Notice the helper text here that we have for the patch command. And now it's looking for updates. Now here's the trick. This is the magic right here. And it took me forever to find this, but now it's all over the place, but not in the context of saving data to a SharePoint list though. That's why I think it's still kind of hard to find. But the trick is to use your forms, right? So I want to save, and when you do this patch statement, you're saving all the data from all the forms. I'm not saving this one at a time. Even though I have this position now, again, this is premature. We're going to actually end up putting the save button all the way down, either on vehicles or history, probably vehicles, right? So we're going to bury this further down in the chain. But for right now, just to kind of test where we are now to make sure things are working as expected, this is why I have this here. But in short, you're going to collect all your forms, right? So I have my form main, and then you do this dot updates. That's the property. So any changes made to that form is going to be updated here. And then you do a comma, because you can do as many of these as needed. Then I do the next form, and this is going to be form engagement dot updates. And again, I just keep a series of these together, just keep stringing these along based on the number of forms that I have, right? So that's going to be my update. Now, I did notice if you pop in this form, let's go back to this form and just kind of see how it's behaving now that we have this component in here. Notice how my form in this knows what mode I'm in. It says edit. Oh, that means I'm in view mode. So my country is in edit mode, even though I'm in a view mode state. My engagement is in view mode. My vehicles form is in view mode, and so on and so forth. So we don't want that. We want our mode. If you start digging into that form component, you will notice that it takes its cues based on that SharePoint integration mode. And that's where we want everything that we build to follow. So what we have here, this form engagement, if I look at the display or the default mode, this is picking up form mode edit. So it's form mode edit, meaning that it's just being hard coded to edit mode. So regardless of which view my SharePoint integration is in, this is always going to show in edit mode. Now, how does form main switch over to its various modes, right? So if you go to its default mode, it's set to edit, but guess what's happening? It's actually being set to a mode on that SharePoint integration. We kind of talked through this, right? So if you look at new, it sets the form main to new mode, or it primes it to handle a new entry. And if we go to edit, it primes it to do an update or an edit entry. And if we do new, it primes it for a new record or a new record entry, right? So one way you can get around is to series these, right? So do new form mode for form main, new form mode for form engagement, new form mode for form vehicles, so on and so forth. And this just becomes tedious. It becomes one of those steps that you forget to make. This is what I've learned, and it's all about maintenance story, right? So what I've learned is that if you just take the primary, you keep your first mode. That's why I named this one main. You notice I didn't name it client or customer or anything like that. I named it main because certain things are going to happen to this that could have a ripple effect to everything else that models it. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to use our form engagement, go to its default mode. Instead of hard coding this to edit, we're actually going to go to form main and say whatever mode form main is set to, set me to that as well. Right? And that's how you keep from having to do all the plumbing and maintenance here. You say, no, SharePoint integration is going to take care of form main. Whatever form main is doing, that's what we're going to mimic, right? The other thing that you want to do is that if you go to form main and then look at its item property, all of this is a copy and paste, and this is just a one-time setup. And we may have it since we duplicated that screen. So let me just double check and see. Yep, so we have all of that. And then the other thing that you want to double check is the data source. And again, because we replicated the screen, that's going to come down for free. But understand, if you, for whatever reason, have to add one of these from scratch, meaning that you're coming to add a component and you type in form and you add in an edit form, those are the three properties you want to make sure you set. You set the data source, you set the default mode, and you set the item property. And most of those are just going to be replicas of what you have going on form main. Now, once we do that and we save our updates, and previous should just navigate back to form main, which is our first form in our series, we should be good to go. So now if I hold down my Alt key, tag it, maybe I should do a next button here. Actually, let me copy both of these. Here's the other thing. You see how you have that overlap here? And this is hard to see until you start selecting these components and you see that overlap. I know this, I think this form is actually sitting on top of that button. What the end user will complain is that if I'm clicking the button, but it's not doing anything. But then you try to replicate it and you click somewhere here and it works just fine. Right? Just make sure you don't have any overlaps or anything that could potentially be blocking your button, and it's just hard to tell, right? So anytime I see an overlap, I just handle that. All right, so here let me just hit cancel, and this is a scenario where they opened it and they was like, nah, I was just curious, I don't need to do anything. So instead, for the first screen, we're going to do a request to hide. Now, notice this is different because usually if you're doing a Canvas app, this will be an exit to prompt them to get out of the application. But when you're doing a custom form and you have a SharePoint integration, because it's integrated with the SharePoint list and you're already on the page and this got popped open as a dialog, the request to hide is the right formula for this scenario versus an exit, right? And then here we're not going to do save. This one we're just going to do next. And this is going to be straightforward. We don't need this complex scenario here. Let's just say navigate to the next screen in the series, which is going to be engagement. So now if I hold on my Alt key, I'm in engagement. If I go previous, I'm at the beginning. If I hit cancel, it's not going to do here in Studio, but if I was live, it would actually cancel out. Okay, let's see if this thing actually saves any records. But I think we may be good to go. So let me just go ahead and save this, publish this up to Power Apps Studio. I'm sorry, to SharePoint. And then this is just a quick way to get to the SharePoint list for this particular form. And now we're here, and now we just kind of go through our series of refreshes. All right. So far this is working as expected. We expect vehicles in history to be out of tune. But notice a couple of things I'm noticing here. Country, we didn't fix that, so we probably have fixed that in the next video. But notice how I'm in view mode and my form's in view mode. And then if I click edit, my form goes to edit. This is edit. These are already in edit mode because they're hard coded. But this is working as expected, right? So now if I kill this and go new, I'm prime, and notice what's happening. Look how it's picking up information from the previous record. That's because it's not primed for new. If you're primed for new, you're empty. Everything's empty, and that form is set up. It's in the mode to collect brand new information versus updating the other one. So again, I love that we have this in place and that residue is still in place, so that way we can see the difference between a form that's primed with the right formulas and strategy versus one that's just still, just dealing with residue and still need to be buttoned up. Okay, so now if I go to, let's just try creating a new one. So if I go new, and let's just type in Fred, and then we can go ahead and select Ohio from here. And again, if we were in Canada, we would have our province there. Oh, here was another ask, how can we do validation? So validation's going to come up. We're probably two or three videos away from validation, but you got to get very creative when you want to validate. So the question was, how do you validate zip code for a province because Canada is selected, and validate the zip code for a state because United States was selected? Understand that the validation regex or regular expression is different for the two, right? So that's something we're going to get into, as well as masking for phone numbers or validating numbers only or things along those lines. So that's going to be a very interesting video. I don't have all of the answers right off the bat. I have a theory of how to pull it off because I understand the anatomy of the data card and how error messaging and validation works naturally with the data card. And then I just have to go through the practice of how to layer in those custom validation messages so that they seem to work as expected. Okay, so this is going to be draft, and then for the dealership, let's select Cleveland, and we know Keelan's the only one there. Click save, and we just assumed it saved. Yeah, it was saving. You see how I got 3. It saved, but it did not close out my dialog box, which is something we probably need to take a look at. So these are true because I clicked on the button several times, so it kind of triplicated it. But let's see, what do we have to do to the save button to close our dialog? So I do my patch. Do I do a request to hide here? Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that's all we're missing. Was a request to hide. I can tell you how you can find out, because a lot of this is experience, right? It's just these things are things that I stumbled across trying to figure out a really working model, a scalable model, one that had a great maintenance story. So these are tips and tricks that I picked up. But a lot of these are just known items. You just have to know where to find them. In your form, and I think this is the default form. So when you first create a Power App form from scratch based on the SharePoint list, if you take a closer look at the form, there is and I think it's in the form and it may be on the screen, on success. There you go. This is the secret, and this is what you want behind that patch. Not only do you want to reset the form, but you also want to do the request to hide. And when I click on the save button from SharePoint integration, it actually execute a save on this form. And you can see it here, right? So you say on save, meaning that I clicked this, right? When you click this, it says on save, execute these steps. And if you reverse engineer those, then you get to see what's happening under the hood, and you can pick and choose what you want to do. Now, let's unpack this a little bit. So when you're on SharePoint integration, you click the out of the box save button that's on that dialog. It's going to execute this submit form. Now, submit form is going to save that data, and I think it waits for a response, and then it does something else. So now if you look at this submit form, you look at the form itself, you can see on reset, do, okay, that's nothing. On failure, do, okay, there's nothing. But there's an opportunity to say if validation didn't pass or it had a problem saving to the list, you can do something to at least alert the user that it didn't happen successfully. But on success, these are the things that it's doing. Now notice, just keep this in context though. This is only the scenario when you're working with a custom form tied to a SharePoint list, right? Because this is the magic glue that kind of pulls everything together. So anyway, so these are the instruction sets we want to have on our save button now, but keep in mind, we're going to be a little bit different because we have more than just one form. So we're going to do this request hide, right? That's going to take care of the dialog. We only have one dialog. And then for the reset form, we need to reset form main, right? And then we need to reset the other forms, right? So whatever we're saving here with those updates, this is what we want to reset. And these are subtle things, but but most of the time they have a huge impact, because all those little snippets of formulas that really just say, I'm not really, modifying the functionality. It's really just changes or enhancements that you're having with the experience. Those become very critical when you are bouncing between these various list items, right? Right. You see how you're bouncing between these list items and things are resetting, and you're gathering that data, right? That's what you want. That's the impact that you want to have for all your custom forms as well, right? So whatever the out of the box form is doing, or that very first form that gets generated for you, because Microsoft ensured that those are primed and ready to go, and they support, this type of, different record selection and things along those lines. Any form that you create, you want to follow that same model, so you feel like it's just a natural fit. Like I just broke this huge form up into smaller stages, and I'm not going to get tripped up where, one like currently what we have now, right? This vehicle is wide open and it should be in view only mode, and there's a pretty good chance it's not showing the current information, right? Actually, we got lucky, but that's fine. But most I'm telling you, you play around with this long enough, you will see like, okay, I'm switching to a different record. Why does it still have the information from the previous record? Like, what is going on? You got to have these resets and things like that in place for this experience to work as natural as expected. All right, that's it for this video. Pretty action-packed. We did very good with jumping through the hoops needed for that people drop down, right, for our primary rep, going through how to save multiple forms across the various screens, the gotchas and things like that to watch out for. And then how to close. Oh, we didn't even test it. Like, okay, is this going to work now? So, and how to with our save button, there we go. We duplicated the record. Oh, it's duplicated, and we know why, right? Because we had that default. So that save make it feel like it's creating a new record. But now we have to get smart with on that patches statement to make sure that when it should be doing an update and when it should be doing a new record, right? Right now we got it hard coded to do a new record. So we got more work to do. But if there's any questions, leave it in the comment section. Again, please like and subscribe if this is your very first time. If this is your very first time, you're actually in the middle, I don't want to say in the middle, but you're in the series that's progressing, right? We don't have an end date. That's a cool thing about this drip strategy. Like as soon as I have the video, I give it to you. And then when I think we're done, that's when we close out the series. But you're in a series that's in progress. So go back to some of the previous videos because we built everything that you see here. We're building from the foundation all the way up, and every video is a stepping stone of the previous. So we have to make sure that we follow these in order. So if you're new, like and subscribe and go back to the beginning video, and I'll catch you on the second time around. But for the rest of us, I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.